Hello there, welcome to the year 2023 and welcome to the weekly Outside Views magazine on the politics of the European Union. The number of asylum seekers in the European Union, the EU, increased significantly in 2022. In the first 10 months of the year, almost 790,000 asylum applications were made in the EU, said the director of the Asylum Authority EUAA, Nina Gregori, to the newspapers of the German Funke Media Group. This is an increase of 54% compared to the same period last year. The geopolitical developments of this year and last have had a direct impact on the needs for international protection and led to increased displacement to EU countries. Gregori expects a further increase in asylum seekers in the EU. It's pretty clear that the growing numbers of applications will continue for the foreseeable future, said Gregori. Instability and threats to human security are characteristics of today's world. Unfortunately, they are not temporary. However, the number remains below those of 2015 and 2016, Gregori added. According to the EU Asylum Authority, most asylum seekers come from Syria, Afghanistan and Turkey. Here in Germany, too, the number of asylum seekers has recently increased. War refugees from Ukraine are not included in the new figures. They do not have to go through a lengthy asylum procedure in the EU. They have been given temporary protection since shortly after the Russian invasion of Ukraine began in February. According to Gregori, 4.7 million people have been registered for it. The activation of the Temporary Protection Directive prevented the collapse of national European asylum systems, and the millions of registrations put the European admission systems under considerable pressure, according to Gregori. Gregori called for progress on the planned EU asylum and migration reform. She welcomes a declaration at EU level that structural solutions should be found before the 2024 European elections. Progress on these issues will be important, she says. On January 1st, the EU country Croatia introduces the euro instead of the national currency kuna. At the same time, the country on the Adriatic joins the border-free Schengen zone. For millions of vacationers from Germany here, this means a double relief. They no longer have to exchange money and save on exchange rate losses. And they can reach their destination without having to wait hours at the Slovenian-Croatian border crossings. Croatia joined the EU in 2013. For the introduction of the European Common Currency, it had to meet a number of conditions, and the exchange rate now is fixed. 1 euro equals 7.5345 kuna. There's a transitional period until January 14th, during which payments can still be made in both currencies. Kuna from the last holiday can be exchanged at banks in Croatia free of charge until the end of 2023, up to 100 coins and notes per transaction. Lithuania last introduced the euro in 2015. Croatia will be the 20th euro country now. According to the EU treaties, all member states except Denmark are obliged to join the common currency as soon as they meet the requirements. However, several countries are not pursuing this vigorously, such as Sweden, Poland and Hungary. The Schengen zone was last expanded in 2011 to include the small state of Liechtenstein, which does not belong to the EU. Tourism in particular has high expectations in Croatia. The country with the long Adriatic coast and the many picturesque bays and islands thrives on tourism. The statistics for the first 11 months of 2022 show 16 million foreign holidaymakers, including 3.4 million Germans. There were 17.3 million, including 2.9 million Germans in the record year 2019. That was the last year before the corona pandemic. The holiday country is also popular with Austrians, Slovenes and Poles, each with more than 1 million travelers in 2022, but also with Italians, Czechs and Britons, each with more than 700,000 travelers. Never before has the introduction of the euro been accompanied by such global economic upheavals as it is now. Russia's war in Ukraine, increased energy costs and delivery problems in the wake of the corona pandemic proved to be inflation drivers across Europe. At 13.5%, the inflation rate in Croatia in November was slightly above the EU average of 10.1%. The Croats, on the other hand, are based on their own life experience and expect that retailers and service providers will round up the conversion wherever they can. The popularity of the introduction of the euro is therefore limited. According to a survey in April, 55% of citizens are in favor of the euro and 42% are opposed to it. What holidaymakers gain from the elimination of exchange fees, Croatia's banks lose. According to experts, the loss of profit will amount to 1.4 billion kuna, that's 185 million euros. That's around 20% of the profit generated by the sector. From the point of view of the economists, however, the advantages outweigh the medium and long term. Participation in euro means more resilience against external shock effects and better access to financial markets. The currency risk for lenders is reduced. Croatia can get loans with lower interest rates. The elimination of checks at the borders with Slovenia and Hungary, and for ferries to Italy and for air travelers within the Schengen area from March 26th, make life easier for holidaymakers, business travelers and commuters. To underline the symbolic effect, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen will come to the Slovenian-Croatian border crossing at Obrežje Bregana on New Year's Day. The Croatians like to celebrate, but because of the rather cautious acceptance of the introduction of the euro, Prime Minister Andrej Plenković's government is refraining from large celebrations. Finance Minister Marko Primorac and National Bank Governor Boris Vučić will withdraw a few euros from an ATM in downtown Zagreb in the first minutes of the new year. Otherwise, Croatians will celebrate New Year's Eve like every year. The EU is stepping up protection of human health and the environment for harmful chemicals and waste. The new regulation on persistent organic pollutants, or POP, comes into force on December 29th. It introduces limit values for some of these chemicals in waste for the first time and tightens existing limit values for other pollutants. Although persistent organic pollutants are generally no longer used in new products, they can still be found in the waste generated by the disposal of some industrial and consumer goods after they have reached the end of their useful life. Persistent organic pollutants are organic chemicals that are characterized by their longevity, so persistence, accumulate in organisms and thus the food chain, and have harmful effects on human and animal organisms. The existing limit values were tightened for 5 substances and for 4 new substances, which, for example, are in waterproof textiles and firefighting foams, in treated wood and other substances, and new limit values have been agreed. Limiting the occurrence of these chemicals in waste prevents them from re-entering the circular economy. The new rules are a clear sign of the EU's determination to lead the way internationally towards a toxic-free environment. Most of the provisions of the regulation will be applicable 6 months after its entry into force on December 29th, so that already happened. The European Commission has declared Amazon's commitments legally binding under EU antitrust rules. Amazon's commitments address the Commission's competition concerns over the use of non-public data by marketplace sellers and any unequal treatment of sellers' access to Buy Box and Prime. Negotiators from the European Parliament and Member States agreed on Sunday to expand the EU emissions trading system and set up a climate social fund for a just transition. The EU emissions trading system puts a price on CO2 and decreases the permitted emission levels every year in areas such as power and heat generation, energy-intensive industrial sectors, and commercial aviation. The deal will cut emissions from the EU ETS sectors by 62% by 2030 compared to 2005 levels. This represents a significant increase of 19 percentage points compared to the 43% reduction under the current legislation. The rate of annual emissions reduction will also increase from 2.2% per year under the current system to 4.3% from 2024 to 27 and 4.4% from 2028. The EU Commission wants to give law enforcement and judicial authorities better tools to take action against human trafficking. Every year, more than 7,000 people are victims of human trafficking in the EU. However, the number of unreported cases is likely to be significantly higher, since many victims are not recorded. The annual cost of human trafficking in the EU is about 2.7 billion euros. Most victims are women and girls, but more and more men are also affected, especially in the area of labor exploitation. In recent years, the forms of exploitation have changed and increasingly shifted to the internet. This requires additional action at EU level, as traffickers benefit from new opportunities to recruit, control, transport and exploit victims, as well as to shift profits and reach users inside and outside the EU. The Commission's proposal provides for mandatory sanctions for criminal offences in the area of human trafficking, including against companies and not just against individuals. It also aims to improve procedures for the early identification of victims and their support in the member states, in particular through the creation of a European referral mechanism. The EU Commission is modernizing the regulations for placing chemicals on the market, thereby improving the protection of EU citizens and the environment from hazardous substances. In addition to a revised classification, labeling and packaging of chemicals regulation, the Commission has also adopted new hazard classes for endocrine disruptors and certain other harmful chemicals. The Delegated Act will introduce new hazard classes for endocrine disruptors under the CLP regulation, as well as for chemicals that do not degrade in the environment and can accumulate in living organisms or pose a risk of entering the water cycle, including drinking water and, of course, spread there. The new hazard classes are the result of extensive scientific discussions and will facilitate access to information for all users of such chemicals, in particular consumers, workers and companies. And they could take further measures to address and mitigate the risks of substances and mixtures under other EU sub-legislation, such as, for example, REACH, while also taking into account the socio-economic impact. Croatia's entry into the euro on January 1st will boost the production of coins in the common currency area. The European Central Bank, the ECB, has authorized the 19 euro countries and Croatia to produce coins with a total volume of almost 2.6 billion euros. That is significantly more than a year earlier. For 2022, the central bank had promised the 19 countries in the currency area the issue of new euro coins in the amount of around 1.8 billion euros. In 2021, it was just under 2 billion euros. In 2020, a good 2.1 billion euros. Of the coin production planned for 2023, a volume of 2 billion euros is intended for daily use. There are also collector coins worth 500 million euros. Germany wants to produce most of the coins again. The volume in Europe's largest economy amounts to 633 million euros, of which 206 million euros are accounted for by collector coins. With a total volume of 343 million euros, Spain has the second highest value of new coins. France is in third place among the euro countries with 339 million euros. Euro newcomer Croatia is the 20th country in the club of countries with a common currency, is planning euro coins totaling 316.77 million euros, mainly for daily use. The ECB sets an annual upper limit for the total volume of coin issuance based on the needs reported by the euro countries. Within this framework, the federal states may then have coins minted. And that concludes this week's report on the politics of the EU, but you know tomorrow there will be another one on the Americas. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.